What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. This is Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net with another thrilling episode of Celestial Compass. Today we're going to be talking about using astrology daily. Before we get into that, I want to do a brief update of the March forecast. Again, forecasts are always available on Om Times and on my site, EmpowermentUnlimited.net, where I have a weekly podcast. That's just on my site. And on my site, as well as Om Times, you'll find monthly forecasts and forecasts for every new moon and full moon. We've just come off a full moon in Virgo. That was very clarifying, basically brought the cleanup crew in. And for the rest of the month of March, there's a very interesting mix of influences. We're all operating in a much more telepathic mode with Mercury in Pisces, and the planet of communication is closing in on the two most boundless influences in the sky, Jupiter and Neptune, who are also in Pisces, heading for an exact conjunction next month. The Mercury-Jupiter-Neptune triangle, teamwork, three-way, whatever you want to call it, will increase our sense of a connectedness to people we've never met before. It will increase empathy and, again, telepathy, and possibly a lot of sorrow could be part of this. Higher guidance, a heightened sense of imagination. Clearly, it is bringing a universal awareness of the experience of people all over the globe, particularly having to do with refugees. Watch that be increasingly something that we're all talking and thinking about. Additionally, Venus and Mars, the planets that rule our desires, our values, and how we go about bringing them into being and pushing them forward, are both moving into a conjunction with Saturn, the planet of adulting, which is going to put some structure and order and maybe some brakes on things that we have been putting into place in our own lives and also collectively. And there is with this a surprise, a trigger, a force of pushing something forward that has been tightly wound and pressurized and hanging out for quite a while as Mars moves into a square with Uranus. And that's kind of the big picture for the rest of the month. Next month will be even more floaty. But for now, we're going to talk about a much more immediate way of looking at astrology. And I'm really happy that my guest today is Robin Langford, the creator of the Wicked Veracity digital astrology calendar. She has one of the more interesting bios I have ever run across in my life. And if you know me, you know I know some very interesting people. Here it is. She's a Stoic witch, astrologer, music fanatic, teacher, time ninja, bibliophile, and a certified life coach for heretics. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
I am thrilled you're here. One question before we get into the astrology aspect of it, because people are going to want to know, what's a Stoic witch?
Well, it's two different things. I use Stoic philosophy, which is the traditional, just Stoic philosophy that's from about 2,000 years ago. If you want me to explain all of that, I will. But basically that your thoughts are responsible for your feelings, and that drives your actions, and your actions produce your results. And so that nothing is objectively good or bad. It's all subjective, and it's up to you to decide how you want to experience it and how you want to experience your fate, essentially. And the witch part is just how I was born. Like, I've always been able to sort of tap into things that other people don't pay attention to.
Okay. I resonate with all of that, and I can also see how that works with you. How did you come to astrology?
I have always been interested in astrology. I can remember when I was I was still in elementary school, and I was obsessed with everything Scorpio because I'm a Scorpio sun. And I had a little Garfield nightgown that had Garfield as a Scorpio. And it was so cute. I wish I could find one now. I would totally wear it. Yeah, so I've always been fascinated. And then I bought every flipping book, I think, that was ever written on astrology. And you know how modern astrology is what all the books were. And I fell in love with it, and I understood it, and I knew something was missing because of the way that it was written. And I'm a systems builder, and so I know how systems are supposed to work, and I knew I was missing something. And then I found this Donna Woodwell, and she introduced me to traditional astrology, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the correct system that I was missing. And it became an obsession, and here we are.
And a way of life.
Yeah.
Yes, so many of us have fallen prey to that. Well, what led you to creating a digital astrology calendar?
Because I'm very selfish, and I wanted it on my digital calendar. All I wanted in the whole wide world of wanting things was the full moon and the new moon on my calendar, on my digital calendar, just so that I could see it easily. And that's what it started with. And there was somebody who was making one for several years that I had, and then they just stopped. And I could not find another one that did what I wanted, because by that point, I also wanted to know when the void moons were. And then I was like, well, I guess I'll make it. So I made it for me, and then I started adding the aspects for the planets. And that's where it came from. It's because I needed it.
Because that would explain why it worked so well. Because you're the primary tester. It's not just a theoretical construct. It is eminently usable, as is pretty much anything I've ever come in contact with that has any association with you. It is usable. Yes, very much so. Well, going from that, to the big topic, how do you use astrology in daily life?
Oh, I use it for everything. So, and actually the calendar, before I even started doing that, when I was learning planetary days and I was learning the meanings of the 7 traditional planets, I started writing them down. Like, I would make the little Venus symbol for Friday, and I would make the little Saturn symbol for Saturday in my daily planner, so that I could really learn what those were. And so I use astrology every day with planetary days. I tend to work harder on Saturdays as opposed to taking it off. I like to go exploring on Thursdays for Jupiter's Day. You know what I mean? I use it all the time. I also use the lunar phases. So if I'm going to launch something or help a client launch something, it's always going to be between the new and the full moon, because that's when things are growing. And if I want to do like a cleanup or a reevaluation, it's usually between the full moon and the new moon. I also use it for manifestation magic. I personally like the hour or so before the full moon, as opposed to setting intentions and trying to manifest on the new moon, because my understanding of the way it works is that it's more effective that way. And that's just on a daily, all the time kind of way. I also, for void moons, I tend to plan deep work, things that I know that I need to do that aren't going to require a lot of peopling or relying on anybody else, because I know there can be delays. Or I plan self-care things like a spa day or sleeping in.
Sleeping in. Oh my
I know.
goodness.
Or taking a nap. I get a little mid-afternoon nap during the void moon. So that's just the daily stuff that I use all the time that's very cyclical. And then I'm looking at my March calendar right now. And I use specific aspects. So like the Sun-Jupiter conjunction that was on the 5th, I did some manifestation work with. And I actually, for the Mars-Venus conjunction in Aquarius, which is in my 5th house, I started using a dating app, that kind of thing. So I do electional stuff as well. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Okay. So I'm just processing the choices that you made here. I was thinking, oh, you're going to mention your kids with the 5th house, but no. Okay.
Not with Mars and Venus. No, that was way too much fun. Come on now. I know you know what that election was for.
Yes, I do. I have 0 degrees. I have a planet at 0 Scorpio in the 8th house. I can see these things. So for people listening, ordinary people, I would like to strip this down and start with very simple things and then maybe elaborate for stuff that people who are more schooled in astrology and might be able to do things with. But for someone that just has a fleeting passing interest in this, I'd like to start with talking about why it might benefit you to pay attention to what the moon is, why it might benefit a person to pay attention to where the moon is. In terms of the moon's sign, that's something that can give you information, right?
For sure. And that is actually another way that I use it. So the calendar that I have also tells you when the moon moves into a new sign. And I find it most useful if you know what signs are associated with what houses in your chart. But even if you don't, and even if you just track how you feel each one, after a couple of months, you're going to start to identify the patterns of which moon signs you tend to be more tired in and which moon signs you tend to feel like doing things more in. And that'll let you plan ahead for those types of activities when the moon will be in those signs. And I find that really useful for anybody.
And the moon tends to stay in a sign
about 2.5 days.
About 2.5 days, meaning that the moon's going to go through all 12 signs in a month, and then it will start the cycle over again. So a person who's starting to pay attention to things will have an ability pretty quickly to track the sorts of things that you're talking about.
For sure. And you'll learn it so well. I mean, it'll be specific to your chart because it'll depend on where it is in your chart, but you'll learn it even if you know nothing about your chart because you'll see the patterns repeating. I've never had anybody who did it for like at least 2 months who didn't start seeing it. And they were always, they're like, I can't believe this works. I'm like, I know, right? It's like magic is real or something. It's just crazy.
And besides the sign that the moon is in, there's the phase that the moon is in can give you some information as well.
For sure. If it's going between a new moon and a full moon, you want to be starting things that you want to increase or that you want to grow. So like if you want to gain weight through working out, like weightlifting, that would be a new moon to full moon thing. If you wanted to lose weight with dieting, that would be a full moon to the next new moon. That's how I would think of it. Anything that you want to grow. That's just very simple, very easy way to remember it. If you want it to get bigger, the moon needs to get bigger. If you want it to get smaller, the moon needs to be getting smaller.
And what about the quarter moons?
I just treat it as a halfway point.
Okay.
What do you do? Do you do something different?
No, I basically don't pay attention to them. I have enough other things I'm paying attention to. I was curious with it, because some people are going to go, what about? So that, you can take stock if you've started something at the new moon when it hits the quarter phase, halfway to the full phase, you can stop and go, is this working? Where is this going?
I think that the waxing crescent I think the crescent moons are more interesting than the first quarter because like when the new moon's going from new to full, that first visible light is actually when manifestation becomes easier through the full moon. And so I pay more attention to that than I do the quarter.
That would make sense. I've heard that from witches, so
Yeah.
it fits completely.
Yeah.
And then again, the sign that it's in would have some information for people as well.
For sure. Mm-hmm. But that's more advanced, like.
Right. But if you're starting to notice these things, it will make sense.
Oh yeah.
Then there's a topic I want to explore a little bit, and we're going to take a break in the middle of it, so I'm just going to start it. And that's this concept of a void of course moon. Can you give a brief definition of what that is?
Well, yes, I can. It's when the moon is made. It's when the moon is made the last traditional aspect. So a square, a sextile, a trine, a conjunction, or opposition to any other planet during its visit to a sign. Then it becomes void until it enters the next sign. And
this is.
Go ahead.
No, you finish.
Oh, it happens. It's usually like between an hour and like 8 or 9 hours, but it can be just a few minutes, all the way up to a day or so. And it happens multiple times a week. There's also the Hellenistic void of course moon, which is way less common, and I don't have that definition in front of me. But so there are different ones, but the void of course moon that I have on my calendar is the one that most astrologers use all the time. So.
And we're going to pause at this moment to take a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss more about why you might want to pay attention to a void of course moon.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. Om Times Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single Om Times endeavor. Host your show with Om Times Radio Network.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
Coping-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking this week with Robin Langford of Wicked Veracity. And just before the break, we introduced the topic of a void of course moon. Why might somebody want to pay attention to when the moon has gone void of course?
So it means that the moon it's not talking to any of the other planets, and it's traditionally considered the image, the go-between. It keeps all the planets and it keeps the energy flowing. And so when it's not making any aspects, it can just feel more still, or people can feel less focused and more introverty, even if they're extroverts. And paying attention to that and just knowing ahead of time that there could be those delays. It doesn't change that there will be a delay, but it can change the way that you're thinking about it, which can be enough to make it not as relevant to your life.
Excuse me. I have found sometimes if you try to push something through during a void of course moon, you get a surprise later when the moon goes direct. Go ahead. No, go ahead. No. Because
I want to hear the story.
Well, the story is, all right. I was representing a nonprofit group that worked a lot with an environment that was under the management of a small town, and they had been trying to get some kind of agreement hashed out with the Parks and Recreation Department, and they weren't getting anywhere, and suddenly we had a meeting with the mayor and a lot of people in the council, and we sat there for a couple of hours, and bam, 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 everybody agreed. People were on the same page. They hadn't been forever and ever and ever. Agreements signed. Things are fine. A couple weeks later, I got a phone call. They finally sent it to the city attorney, and he said that certain protocols weren't followed, and the whole thing had to go back to square one. And I looked at my calendar and went, oh, the moon was void, of course, during our meeting. And the whole thing unraveled and had to be redone.
Yeah. So things that are started during the void moon usually, like you were saying, they don't go to plan or nothing comes of them. So I don't schedule business meetings. I don't schedule contract negotiations or signings or first dates or a whole lot. I don't schedule anything I want to become anything during a void moon.
So putting it positively, how might you use it? Like, I'm going to a movie, or this is when I take a nap, or...
Yeah, I mean, like I said, deep work is really good because you don't have to be interrupted. That's just you and your thoughts. Creative writing, like for me, if I have to do sales copy, or if I have to put in, because, the calendar doesn't just make itself. I put in each and every one of those little glyphs that you see. And so I find that's a really good time for me to do it as void moons, because it's just very, very, like, soothing for me to do. It's kind of, it doesn't require me to think a lot. It just requires me to not make mistakes. Just not something new, but continuing something you'd already started.
That's an excellent piece of... That's what you'd use. Okay. And again, I look at it as wonderful downtime, or know that there's a reason people aren't responding to your email messages or to your phone calls back when people used to actually phone each other. Just sit back, chill, don't take it personally, go do something else is what I deal with it. So what else might somebody in a big picture pay attention to? I mean, one thing that jumps out at me would be when when outer planet transits are going to become, outer planet aspects are becoming exact, that might be something really good to track.
Yeah, I pay attention to that. And also, like, when they move into other signs. So Mercury moved into Pisces on the 9th. And that was a pretty big change from being in Aquarius. A huge shift. And that's true for all of them, right? So, like, when Jupiter goes into Aries in May, that's going to be a substantial shift of Jupiter in Pisces yumminess to, more... I think of Jupiter in Pisces as more of a, like, St. Augustine kind of guy, and Jupiter in Aries as more of a warlord, really, like more the expansive colonization kind of vibe. You know what I mean? Like, and a little less friendly.
Mars is going to move into Aries around the
right
same
then.
time, so
Yep. Yep, that's a big deal, right? Like, so that's a big deal. And because that big planet is changing its entire sign, and instead of it having its allegiance to itself and the, like, priestly vibe, it's going into a planet that has a warrior vibe, ruled by a warrior who's also going to be co-present. Like, that's a huge energetic shift that everybody's going to feel.
So we'll go from this vaguely pleasant anesthetized Pisces predominance that we've had with more and more and more with Jupiter in the middle of it to this, like someone suddenly turns the pilot light on and we're all running around forcing ourselves onto things rather than going with the flow. Well, that would be something very important for people to follow and notice how things change in their lives and how their own impulses change. And a person looking ahead and planning might say, okay, this is coming mid-May and it's going to be with me all summer. Maybe I'll put the really active stuff in a few months and still let myself float and imagine things now. That might be one way of looking at all this.
Yeah, I'm so, like, when people ask me for, like, how they should specifically use it, I'll always say you should book a consult with somebody like Kathy and find out what your chart is, because it really, really, really matters what houses those are happening in. And without knowing what house it is, I mean, we could go through each rising sign, I guess, but without knowing that specifically, it's so hard for me to tell people. I'm like, well, I don't know. Is it in your 12th house? Is Aries your 12th house, or is it your 10th house? Like, because there's a big difference in how that's probably going to show up, right? And so that would be the thing that I would honestly tell people, is find somebody to give you a reading or go pull up your chart. And the second thing that I think is super important for, especially for outer planet transits that are big energy like that, is knowing your Time Lord of the year. And I don't know if you work with profections and Time Lords or not, but it's how I decide. It's how I tell people what to focus on, because trying to plan your life around all the planets is very, it can be overwhelming. But if you know who your Time Lord is, and you know that you're paying attention to what that planet's doing all year, I find it to be more predictive and useful. So I know that
the Time Lords are all they're all traditional rulers of signs. So
they are.
And it doesn't go to the far end of our solar system, right?
It does not. So it's the traditional rulers, yeah. And it changes every year based on your birthday.
More things people can learn. But if they're just right now paying attention to what is happening in the sky in this moment, and how can I look at my own life and figure things out. So there are some big picture atmospheric bits of information you can get based on where the moon is, based on what sign various planets are in. And then there's a more personalized level of information that derives from actually knowing what houses things are moving through in your chart. Right? Yeah,
and I mean, like, the general stuff too is a really good indicator of just what's happening in the world. They can get kind of a better flavor of that too without having to know anything about houses. So right now, with Mercury and Jupiter and the Sun and every flipping thing trying to cozy up to Neptune, that's a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation and a lot of not knowing what's going to happen next, is the way that I read it. What about you?
That is definitely a streak in all of this. I also see the we are all in this together atmosphere, like a streak in it, like the giant sea of humanity, and picking up on empathy, unwitting, boundary blurring going on, picking up on stuff from other people without knowing whether it's yours or theirs. So there's a possibility in all this for more compassion and empathy and understanding. There's also a possibility for complete emotional overload and being bogged down in other people's experiences and not even knowing that you're on empathic overload.
That's true. I forget. Like, I forget there are baby empaths out there that don't have good boundaries in place and, like, all the extra stuff to, like, keep them safe. And so, yeah, this would be a great time for them to learn how to do that.
Yes, it would. And knowing this and knowing that we're kind of in a training for it now, and that a lot of things are going to all dry off, like dogs jumping out of the water and shaking all the water off when Jupiter moves into Aries in May, and then running after things instead of just floating along and waiting to see what's going to be there, but actually actively running.
Yeah, and another interesting thing that's happening like right now is that Venus is between Mars and Saturn. And so I also think that, especially right now until Venus gets past Saturn, a lot of the things that we want, like the desire that Venus can signify and the need for beauty, it's very much locked between the two grumpier planets, subjectively, of course. But making those things a little more difficult to wrap your mind around too right now. And so I think that's probably adding to like feeling very trapped, and it might be between a rock and a hard place kind of, and also all of the emotional overload. I think, yeah, I mean, I think that it's just good to acknowledge that that can be challenging for people everywhere.
And this might be a good place for me to slip in that you have a predictive podcast that comes out every week, a forecast podcast.
I do. That's true.
So
Yep,
Wicked Veracity is not just a digital calendar. It is also a weekly podcast.
Yes, ma'am. And I do currently, it started with mostly Stoic philosophy and life coaching things. And I had a request to do horoscopes. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. And because I already did it for me, and I did it for a few clients. And so it is mostly like between a 3 to a 8 minute podcast that comes out every Sunday night, Monday morning. And I also have daily forecasts, little snippets of it on my Instagram, where I'm also wicked.veracity. And probably if I can get it done, there'll also be a calendar add-on with the daily forecast that people can buy that'll go on their calendar in probably July.
There's something that comes out by email.
Yeah, it's the same forecast. I send it by email because I have people. I know I was a teacher. I don't know if we went into this or not, but I was a teacher for a really long time. That's the reason that my systems are pretty decent, and they're just all types of different learners. And so I have people who follow me that would rather read it all at once. I have people who would rather listen to it all at once because they're auditory processors. And then I have people who have more difficulty with attention and they'd rather get it every single day. And so I provide it all the ways.
And this would be a way that somebody could start to track where planetary positions are currently and how this plays out in their real life.
For sure.
And start making use of things. And actually what I see in your newsletter is you do give people ways of looking at on a personal level what is going on. Like, this would be a good time to do this. These are the actions that are suited for today.
I try.
Blah, blah. And it's also very entertaining, people, in case you haven't figured that out by now.
I can be a little funny sometimes.
Yeah. Well, neither one of us knows about stuff like that.
No.
So people, there are all kinds of different things that people can get out of tracking what is going on in the sky and making sense of it in a way that I personally look at it as operating, for one thing, as a weather forecast.
For sure.
Like, this is what the environment is out there when you step outside your house. Well, actually, these days, you don't even need to step outside your house. This is what's going on. This is what you're likely to encounter among other humans.
Right.
And here's how you could adapt your approach to make the most of it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I try to point out is that it's the general environment. And so astrology can be talking about you, or it could be talking about events in your life, or it could be talking about the people in your life. And just because you're not feeling that particular energy, if you're aware that other people might be feeling a little extra stabby that day, then you become less reactionary because you're like, oh, you're my Mars today, aren't you? Like, that's how I think about it. And I don't know, it makes people more compassionate when they pay attention, I think.
Yeah, there's a reason for this. It's not just people are being difficult for the sake of being difficult.
Well,
although sometimes they are. Yeah.
Like, come on.
We
now.
both immediately qualify that thought. I know.
I don't know. I think some people are a little extra Mars every once in a while. I don't know if I've said this, but the thing, my tagline, or like my philosophical belief in one sentence, is that I coach at the crossroads of fate and free will, because I believe fate is predetermined, and that's what you can see through astrology, and your free will is the way that you experience it, right? And so that's very much what anything that I do and anything that I put out will reflect.
Well, this is why we get along.
Yeah.
One of many reasons. Yeah, because it's what you do with it, I mean, you could know that it's going to be raining outside. Are you going to walk outside uncovered and then curse the sky because it's made you wet? Or are you going to know, oh, it's raining, I should act accordingly?
Yeah, I should totally strip down and go dance or get an umbrella, whichever. But
whichever is appropriate for the circumstances. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, with that notion, I think we will pause for our final break. When we come back, we will talk about the Equinox chart of March 20th.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
How would you like navigational tools you can use on your own? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and click the Shop tab. There you'll find lots of talks and guides explaining the big influences at work now, like Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. You'll also find a variety of guided visualizations for relaxing, clearing your energy, or getting to know planetary archetypes. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking with Robin Langford, the creator of the Wicked Veracity digital astrology calendar, and we've been talking about ways you can use astrology in your own life for planning and just knowing the general forecast and understanding what's going on with other people. And for the final segment, I would like us to look at the Equinox chart when the sun moves into the sign of Aries, the start of the astrological year. It launches spring in the northern hemisphere, autumn in the southern hemisphere. And what I find, just looking at the chart, it's a couple of days after the Virgo full moon, which had an intensely obvious planetary pattern called a bucket, with the moon being all by itself on one side of the sky and everything else being on the other side. By this time, March 20th, the moon has scooched out of Virgo and is nearly at the end. So it's still technically a bucket, but it's not so much the handle. What jumps out at you when you look at this chart, Robin?
So I'm looking at the chart that you sent me, and I'm also looking at it the way that I would pull it up. And I put it with the ascendant. I put the ascendant on mine, and the thing that I thought was super interesting, there were two things. Black Lilith is exactly conjunct, like within there's only a 1 minute difference with the ascendant of the Aries of the Equinox chart. I think that's going to be a lot of feminine, wild energy for spring, and I don't know. I don't know what I think about that yet, but I think it's interesting, and do you want me to put a positive spin on it, or?
We'll discuss all possibilities. I've got several things I've circled for discussion, so you just go at it, and then I'll bring up things that don't come up.
Okay. Mercury and Jupiter being conjunct so tightly with Mercury applying to Jupiter, I think that's going to be a lot of news. I think that's pretty interesting. A lot of big news.
I'm calling it a tsunami.
Yeah, I mean, you think?
Well, of news, of information.
Oh, okay.
Well, who knows? Well, yeah, actually, because Mars is squaring Uranus, yes, there could be some development that actually happens in the earth, in the water. That, it could be. But I meant like metaphorically.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be very, very interesting, especially because I use the ascendant, so it shows me when I do it that way, like the actual moment, I get the Sun in the 11th house and Mercury, Jupiter, and Neptune in the 10th house. And so that makes me think it's going to, like something massive coming out. And I don't know if it'll be on that day or if it'll just be during the Aries ingress, or I don't know, but there's something coming. And
what location are you using for the ascendant?
Mine.
Okay, for yours, because I put it at 0 Aries so that it would have applicability to anywhere on the planet, but that makes sense. Okay, so very possibly somewhere in the eastern U.S. it's going to be huge public news. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and because it's that's a good point. Come on, Kathy, do you mean that other parts of the world matter too, other than just my little area? Is that what you're trying to tell me? I don't think so. I don't think that could be true.
I have a 29-degree Jupiter. Of course I am.
And you know where my Jupiter is? It's conjunct my midheaven. So obviously the world revolves around me. So
go for it.
I know, right? So yeah, I just think, but regardless of where it is, like I don't think it matters like where in the world you are. Big interesting news will be happening. And I still don't like the fact that Venus is in between Mars and Saturn. Like, I don't love that. I feel like there's a block between what we want to accomplish and our ability to do it. Like, we still have to get past some roadblocks before we can do what we really want to do.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Just so people who don't have this in front of them can know, in this chart, there are 3 bodies in Pisces, Mercury and Jupiter, very close together, and they're moving towards Neptune, all in Pisces. Then in Aquarius, there is Mars at 10, almost 11 Aquarius, Venus at 13 Aquarius, and Saturn at 20, almost 21 Aquarius. So that's just putting the brakes on things, or constraining it, or a wall, or a delay, or you got to be responsible. I mean, that's a possibility too.
And nobody's going to want to do that with all that Pisces.
No, they're not. What strikes me, what hit me immediately when I looked at this, and what do you think of this? The moon is void, of course. The moon is at 29. It's like 6 minutes at the end of Libra, about to go into Scorpio.
Yeah.
So it's not me.
Yeah. I look at it and I always think it's interesting when a big event like that Mars-Venus conjunction was also during a void moon. And so for big events like that, I tend to go back to the Hellenistic definition, which is if it's not making an aspect within the next 30 degrees. That's like a complete no-go zone. And if it's a big event chart like that, I look more at that. But I think it could also just mean that there's surprises. But that plays into all the Neptune energy with the news that's coming out.
Which points to a truism of astrology, and that is if a chart says something once, if it's important, it says it two, 3, 4, 5 different ways.
For
So,
sure.
and also the moon is in Libra, which is ruled by Venus, which you brought up. So there are big social issues, big partnership agreement issues, maybe legal issues. Definitely, this underscores women again, and maybe not quite moving with the speed that the women want or that the women's interests want.
Yeah, but the great thing is, like, you know that it's going to, right? Like, because she's going to get past Saturn and then she's going to go into Pisces, and it's going to be a totally different story. We just have to get there.
Right. So in this chart, Mars and Venus are both applying to Saturn. So during this time frame, they're both going to meet with him. And I see those as put a ring on it moments, like,
ooh.
Are you committed? Do you want it?
Yeah.
Are you going to make it happen? Are you acting responsibly? And other sassy ways of putting this is that they're big kid pants moments. Like, okay, time to suit up.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it will be like big kids getting told no too. So like Venus is going to hit Saturn. I think there'll be a lot of no's, just a lot of hard no's before you can move on. But then you'll know, right? Like you may not know right now because you're kind of in that in-between liminal space. But then when Venus hits Saturn, it'll be a hard no, so that you then know what the yeses are going forward. Is the way that I think it could play out, or it could be a yes.
It's stabilizing in one way or another, like putting
Absolutely.
a box on it in some way.
Yeah.
Whatever it ends up being in your life.
For sure.
What about Mars? Okay, Mars at 10 Aquarius in this chart is at the degree that Saturn occupied in December at the third Saturn-Uranus square, which happened on December 24th. And Uranus is almost at the degree. It's like a half a minute or a little bit more than half a minute off the degree that Uranus occupied last June during the second Saturn-Uranus square. So it seems to me something's been teed up.
Right.
And when Mars makes that square exact, a lever gets pulled. Something
be more
happens.
Volatile. Yeah. And I think it'll probably be more explosive or more volatile because that's two, big booms getting together.
In the midst of everybody running around anesthetized with all that Pisces.
Yep. And maybe that's the big news that comes out. I mean, that's a lot of energy. And Venus will have just made the square to Uranus. So there was probably a little preview right before. And then... yeah, I'm not really looking forward to that either. I'm not looking forward to the Mars-Uranus square. That's not my favorite thing.
Okay. Alternate viewpoint here. So we're in this situation where things feel stuck, where there's something you want to push forward, and there will be movement of some sort. Mars going across a sensitized degree, and Mars triggering Uranus, I see as celestial clockwork going click, bam, and something happens that's been, again, teed up, that's been pressurized, that's been rattled, the ground has been cultivated. It will probably happen in a way we don't see coming or don't expect, because with Uranus, I don't even waste breath trying to predict what will happen. It's just massive plot twist.
Yeah.
Massive plot twist.
Now,
other things.
Hold on.
Yes?
I was going to say, I just want to qualify that with, I actually love both Uranus and Mars. I have a ridiculously strong Mars, and I have Uranus conjunct my Sun. I don't have anything against them. I just think that subjectively, it's not the kind of energy people generally enjoy, even if it's the exact type of thing they need. So.
Oh, well, I agree. There's an uncomfortable aspect to it, because if you're holding on to something tightly, you get a jolt of electricity and it breaks your grip.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel good.
Or even like, let's say, and I'm not saying that people are going to get fired or anything, but like, let's say you get fired from this job that you hate and you're not happy about it, right? Like you wanted to keep the job because you like the financial stability, but because you got fired, you go out and you apply for a different thing and you end up landing your dream job and you've never been happier. So I think everything always works out. I just think maybe subjectively. I just want to qualify it that way because some people are like, oh no, she said the world was going to end. I didn't say that.
No.
I didn't say that.
No, and actually I do see, taking the free will aspect of this, Mars squaring Uranus, this could be a time when an individual, maybe not entirely consciously, maybe unwittingly, knocks something loose that causes movement. Mars squaring Uranus reminds me of the old black and white movies when someone's walking around in a library and it's dark and they move a book and then suddenly the wall turns and you're in a room you didn't know was there, or you found a passageway you were looking for. This can be consciously harnessed. It's one thing I'm trying to say. And part of why I mentioned the dates, mid-June last year, December 24-ish last year, there may be something that was showing instability or teetering that gets one little nudge, bam, now, and it moves into something. There's a fracture, it moves into a new framework, it moves into a new structure. For sure. And I think, and movement for me, again, I do have Uranus conjunct my sun. Movement forward is always a good thing. I would always rather be going forward than be stuck somewhere. So, well, I have Uranus conjunct my moon, so
yeehaw, reasons we get along.
oh yeah. So I don't want people to freak out, and also also the fact that there's all this Piscean blankety. Oh, I'm off in the clouds. I don't know where I am. I think I'll just watch Netflix for 3 days kind of vibe going on. I think cushions a lot of what happens. A lot of our experience of what happens.
Well, I think people might be more inclined, I call it buffering, when they do something, a preferred activity that allows them to escape their feelings so they don't have to think about it. I think there'll be a lot of that with Mercury and Jupiter like moving in on Neptune. I think that'll be the inclination. And I would encourage people to resist that because I'm always going to support and advocate for living your most intentional life. And so I think if you do that, I think if you lean into the Pisces too much, you might miss the opportunity to be the Mars in instigating the change that you want in your life. Okay. Thoughts?
And well, again, this is a moment of actually making of something happening that you got the early warning signals for last year.
Right. Was that June of 2021 and December of 2021 or December of 2020?
Both in 2021.
Okay.
Yeah, December of 2020 is when Jupiter and Saturn met at 0 Aquarius, which is where Venus and Mars met this month after they went through their little time with the scythe of Pluto.
It was so good. It was so good. I love that. I love the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction.
Well, and now we're like building something out of it. Like, what are we going to do? Networks and collaborations and coalitions in our own lives. And I encourage people, as I always do, to look at whatever is going on in the news, whatever you're fixating on collectively, is a macro version of some little saga happening in your own life. How can you take that and bring it down into, oh, here's my version of it?
That's a really good point.
Right. And we've got a lot of cotton candy this month to make it a little sweeter with all of that stuff.
That's true. That is true. Like, that's like, I'd say that it's also buffering, but like with Mercury and Jupiter and that Neptune, that's also very romantic. It can be like poetry and love songs and all the things. It's pretty nice.
And it's leading up to next in April when Jupiter and Neptune meet and have a conjunction in Pisces that they haven't occupied since 1856, and imagination and fantasy could be off the charts at that point. So this chart is well worth people running and looking at themselves. Run it for 11:33 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Adjust it for wherever you are on the planet on March 20th, 2022.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you, Robin. Any last words you want to say to the people at large out there?
I would love for you to visit me at wickedveracity.com, and I am Wicked Veracity everywhere. I'm primarily on Instagram, where I'm wicked.veracity. And when you were talking earlier about what would be beneficial for people, they went to a advertisement for you have little individual products that help people manage their energy, and also specific planets in the sign so that they can just focus on one thing. I really think people should do those. Like, that would be super useful.
It would be. I have a Reclaiming Your Energy free course and also a lot of meditations with the different planets at empowermentunlimited.net. So thank you for that reverse plug. And thank you so much, Robin, for hanging out with me and just chatting about one of our favorite topics, astrology.
Okay.
All right. Everyone be safe. Talk to you again in a few weeks.